Welcome back to the channel, everybody. Well, I've been busy, and today is going to be a big day. So, welcome back to the channel. Yes, things are taking a big turn today. I'm getting ready to mount the engine and the transmission together because I am in the process of building a run-in stand so I can get this engine running and transmission turning before it goes into the 64. So just using some scrap steel, I've kind of got a stand here just mocked up right now. This is just going to be the main mounts. There's going to be a lot of supports that are going on this and some more brackets to help hold it a little better. It's going to be on wheels so I can move it around my shop. And I'll slowly add on parts so I can put my radiator in front of this thing and have it on. A little bit of an ignition system, fuel system. Because my plan is to get this thing running, get it moved outside, and I'm going to do my break-in with no load on the stand before it goes into the 64. Then I'll check for leaks, water leaks, exhaust leaks, anything. I'll be able to have this thing fully running, making sure everything is smooth and going good before we shove it in there and it becomes a lot harder to work on. So I got my engine prepped. I'm ready to go. I got a nice strap here. I'm going underneath the intake here. So I got this whole meaty thing held on by 8 bolts, 4 on each side. That's what I'm going to hang the engine from. So I've removed my power steering pump. I've taken off the exhaust manifolds. Got my engine mounts cranked down. And some other prep I've been doing. Got my dowel pins installed to line up my transmission. Got some work I got to do to the end of the crank, but I got to get it off the stand, of course, to do that first. But then we got some stuff that we had to do to the transmission. So over here on the transmission, at the torque converter, we got to get ready so we're able to install the flex plate. Now, the flex plate will be going onto the engine as such, just like that. It goes on first. It has all these 6 bolts in the middle to hold it on, but you'll notice that only 2 of these bolts really line up straight across the hole. The rest are offset a little bit, and so they only go on a certain way. The same goes with the bolt holes that are out on the end here. You'll see some are closer to the end, some are in the middle. This one's off to the top a little bit, off to one side. And that's because they only fit one way onto that flywheel, onto the torque converter. There's only one spot they can go. Now I've pre-tested this, and I put a shot of red paint at the top there to match the red paint on the torque or flex plate. So I know that's where it goes. So once I get the engine and the transmission together, I'm not fighting with this thing, trying to figure out, where the bolts line up. So I'll be able to just underneath, I'll be able to turn this around till I find the red spot on the bottom, and then I can turn the engine around. What I'll end up doing is I'll crank the engine over first before I do it by hand, just to get that to the bottom. Then I'll know where they're going to be, and that'll make it extra easy to put it in. Now the next thing I've done is I've cleaned off the shaft here. This little nub, the stub end, this fits inside the end of the crank. Now it's not a long shaft. There's actually a ridge, almost like a ring in the middle here. That's the only part that actually helps center it. So with the dowel pins on each side of the transmission, this here should slide in. Now I've got it all cleaned off, the paint from the factory paint from when they rebuilt this thing. I'll be putting never sees around this, and the same is going to go with the end of the crank, the flange. We'll clean that off, buff it off, make sure there's no rust or debris on there, no burrs. We'll make sure that this is going to be able to fit nice and tight against it and flat. And we'll have never sees, of course, on here, and also a little bit in the end of that hole. We don't want too much. We don't want to create a hydraulic lock where we can't get it all the way in. So but that'll just help it so it doesn't seize in there, so that if I ever have to take this apart, it should just pop right out. One more thing I've done as well too is I've taken the starter and I've made sure that my bolts line up good, but also the end of the starter fits good inside of this hole here. Now this little pocket course, it just holds the end of the starter. The starter is the factory, the original one to this engine, or the original one to the transmission when I took it apart. So I test fit it. It fits good. So hopefully it'll be a worry-free installation to mate these two together. So now that I got all that stuff ready, I got to get my transmission brought over here, set on some wood, and now I got to get my tractor in here and lift my engine off and hang it so I can spin it around, and hopefully these two things will go together beautifully. There we go. Engine is flying high outside here. Got it off the stand. Let's look at my bracket. I got to be removed. So yeah, I grabbed it right here underneath the intake. I have a small enough strap and the ends just fit underneath, so I grabbed it good, nice and level side to side, grabbing it right dead center of the engine. Now I did have to put on this little strap here. There's not much tension on it, but the engine did sag to the front, so that's just to straighten it up, and I can use the ratchet up there to level it even more if I need to while I'm hanging it to get on the transmission. I'm going to do the transmission right there on the end of the table. I'll be able to come in with the tractor, line it all up, and then I'll be able to do fine adjustment just by using my controls, and hopefully it'll go on good. But got to get this off, run a tap through these holes, make sure everything's clean, get a wire wheel, and clean off the end of that crank. Now this is a product I like using whenever you don't need something to stick together permanently. This copper coat anti-seize, this is good stuff. So I've gone through with my wire wheel and I've cleaned off the face of the flanger. This is the crank. That's the end of the crank. So I cleaned it out. I made sure all my bolt holes are clean. Made sure all my bolt holes are clean around the bell housing. You can see my dowel pins hanging out there. Then I also put a wire wheel inside here just to clean up inside there. Put some copper coat in there too. And I put copper coat on the end of the stub here on torque converter, making sure that it was nice and clean, nothing in it. This will make it so that down the road, hopefully not me, but if someone needs to take that transmission off, hopefully a torque converter will pop right out of there. All right, so these are the bolts that go on the flex plate. They're kind of funky looking. Not really sure what that means, but they are the ones that come off there. And these are going to get torqued on to 55 foot-pounds. Now, you can see the red here. That's the spot that I'm looking for with the match up to the end of the torque converter. So once I get this all cranked on to 55 foot-pounds, we'll throw a big socket on the end of the crank, and we'll turn this to get that down at the bottom, and that'll make it easy for me to line the torque converter. And then when I go to slide it together, I might as well do it now. I'll make sure that that one is at the bottom, and hopefully it's going to go smooth. Well, here we are, balanced out, and I have the front engine mounts just sitting on the stand now. So I got my back piece here, and it just sneaks under. I actually had to cut a 1/4 inch off from what I originally tried to make my measurements, but that's her. So I'm gonna line that up so it's centered on the rear transmission mount, clean off my paint on the blue kind of the backbone there, weld it up, and drill some holes. Well, here we are so far. So, engine back off. Got my marks. I should have been in a little bit further with my measurements. I thought 19 3/4, and I double checked it again actually, and it is 19 3/4, but the holes aren't perfect centered on those motor mounts. And you can see like one is back here, and one is quite a bit forward, but that's the way it is. Rear of the tail of the transmission, no problem at all there. 2 holes as well. Gonna get the holes drilled. Now, as for more bracing, I'm gonna drastically reduce the amount of bracing I got, and I do believe it's gonna be fine. I'm gonna put a 45 here on the back, going from the tail, where the tail transmission is, down to the backbone. That'll stop any movement forward and reverse. There's no way it's gonna shear off this. This one here is actually, what is this one? Oh, this is the 2 inch by 1 1/4 inch. There's no way it's shearing that off. and it's 1/8" wall. That'll stop this movement, and then I'll do a V here, just the odd chance that it could sway and kind of like splay itself over. So I'll brace that up as well too. And that'll be it really for the mount. I'm gonna throw some paint on it, but I'm gonna put some wheels too, but I don't know where they're at. They're somewheres. I have them here somewheres in my mess. And speaking of mess, I have to clean this up a little bit before I get too far into it as well too. So let's get at her. Boom, just like that, we are finished. So, got my holes drilled in there, right where hopefully they need to be. Got the cross bracing in, got my tail shaft support, and you know what? I believe that is all she's gonna need. And of course, I couldn't have something so, multicolored and rusty in my shop, so I just hit her with a quick coat of rust paint. Nothing fancy. I'm sure it'll flake off a little bit. Some of that blue paint was a little bit flaky. Just to cover it up, just to make it look a little presentable right now. But now it is time to bring the engine back in. I'm gonna set it on. I still want to put wheels on this thing, but I can do that at any point. This thing is actually quite light. I can lift it up and carry it pretty easy. Get the engine on there. When I find my wheels, or if I have to buy new ones, then I'll lift the whole thing up, set them underneath, weld them up quickly, and it'll be good to move this around. And there she is, on the stand. Looking mighty fine. So it went on there perfectly. No issues at all. Bolt holes lined it up great. No concerns at all with this thing. It is solid on here. Now the feet do stick out like 8 inches past each side, almost twice as wide as that transmission is. No problem at all. Same as the back. It's nice and stable. But I did skip a day. It's an extra day past. I ended up putting a few things on here. One, the starter. That is the original starter for this engine. Of course, we got the manifolds on, and these have been put on. Gasket is in. I don't know if you can see it. There it is sticking out. And torqued to 30 foot-pounds. These Mopar big blocks, if you're using bolts or studs, either way, they go straight through the head into the water jacket. So you got to make sure whatever high heat product you're using for sealing, high heat sealant, you need to make sure that you put some of that on those bolts, because they do go right through and you don't want that water working its way out there and squirting out. I've gone through and I put the speedometer cable on. It was kind of a boring, tedious little job, but everything does come apart. Cleaned it, everything's working good, runs smooth. I can turn my tail shaft and it turns up there on the other end. So another thing done. Now, also, what I did is I brought home a couple fittings here from work. We make a lot of hoses at work. So these are JIC. The fittings that come out of your transmission at the back here on these A727s, they are a JIC -5. So -4 is a quarter, of course. -6 is 3/8. These are 5. They're right in between. It's an odd size. I don't know why they did this. We have very limited amounts. We only have them in straights at work. I will be making my own lines for this car, so when I do, I'll have to get one of these in 45 and 190. 45 will just come out nice just to make it around my kickdown linkage. I'll have a bracket. I think it mounts to this one. Continue on. This one will be 90, so it comes straight up the side. Just make it a little nicer. This is just a jumper. I'm going to run this in, not looking at run it hard. There'll be no torque or no actual load on this transmission, so I don't have to worry about heat. So this is the line that ends up going to the cooler. This will just end up looping back on itself, just so keep it sealed up. We still got to do the shifting linkage. We got to get that in there, block that hole off, and also the park brake down here. That's a big hole. We got to get that done as well too. But that's what I'm doing. That's what I'm working on. So anyway, let's keep her going. Just keep her going and keep chugging along. But that's where I'm leaving her today. I'm going to do the shift cable next. That'll be my next thing I do. It's just the same thing. I'm going to pull it apart the best I can. The shift cable, the inside part, does not come out. So I'm going to have to clean it up. Try to get a little, probably a little lubrication down in there. It is moving good now. Moving in and out, no problem. But you know what? Doesn't hurt to lube it up. I'm sure there's a little bit of surface rust in there. It did sit in the bush for 40 years. or more. But my fire's getting low. I'm getting thirsty. And that's it for another video here in Duchesne's Corner. I want to thank you all for stopping by. Thanks for following along. Love you all. Catch you again later.